appreciate you being here. And for those who are listening, he is also a doctor, so we want to give him his accolades for that. We really appreciate you coming. And I kind of want to just start with a personal story before we go into like all
Mm.
of your expertise. Tell me why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, first off, thank you so much for having me on the show, Barbie. And I'm truly honored to be here. So I'll start from the beginning a little bit. So my journey into coaching, being a holistic wellness and performance coach, it's a reflection of my own personal journey of growth, and it's been a really transformative one where I blend my background in traditional medicine with integrative medicine, alternative therapies, and processing my own life, my own traumas, and my own life lessons. So I started off as a neurologist and sleep specialist in New York City, and it didn't take very long at all to quickly become disillusioned with the whole healthcare system. Like as you probably know, it's very profit driven, productivity driven. 15 minutes per follow-up. It's just really nearly impossible to really get to the root cause of ailments. It's very much about take care of the symptoms and just get them out of the office and get the next one in, right? So
Yeah.
that realization sparked my wanting to branch out and find a way to practice medicine in the way that I wanted to practice, which was in a much more holistic and integrative way. So that led me to the path of getting formal training in medical acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. So I took a big risk. I left what was like a very stable job at the time. My wife was still in training. She's like, "This is crazy," but she knew that it's just something you have to do. You have to follow your heart. You have to follow your passion. So I took a risk. I left that stable W-2 job and I started my own practice. It was outside the insurance system. I had no idea if it would succeed or fail. But it quickly took off and it became such a wonderful experience. I got to spend time with patients and I learned so much. I learned just how to integrate all the various aspects of mind, body, just the different aspects of wellness. And I really got to know my clients really well. And to this day, I still keep in touch with a lot of them, even though I don't practice medicine clinically anymore.
Yeah.
So fast forward to 2019, things were looking really great on the surface, right? So I had a thriving practice. My wife had a really great job in the city. We were both doing marathons. She ran a personal best that year. I ran the Boston Marathon. I ran under 3 hours later that year. We had two young, beautiful children. Like on the outside, like people would say, "Oh wow, what a power couple," right?
Yeah,
Like
you
you
look good
guys
on
are
paper, right? You look good on paper.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But beneath the surface, what happened was that our marriage was facing profound trials, and we it sort of snuck up on us. But then looking back, we realized, oh, this was actually building up to that point. But it got to the point where it nearly pushed us to the brink, and to the point that we were seriously talking about like separation and divorce. And I remember like still sitting at the dining room table looking at house listings in our town for where we would live separately, right?
Mm.
Because we still needed the kids to go to school and whatnot. Um, and then the pandemic hit, right? And then that just made everything even worse. So we had a choice to make. Do we let this break us up, or do we somehow use it as a catalyst for growth? Right? And luckily, we decided to choose the latter, even if we thought that the chance of us pulling this off was really low. Right?
Mhm.
So that's when we started to put in the hard work and really go through like deep introspection. We worked with couples therapists, and then that's when I decided to work with my own personal therapist because it quickly became apparent that our marriage problems, it wasn't our fault. It was us bringing a lot of these maladaptive coping mechanisms
Yes.
from our childhoods, all these unhealthy patterns um, that we saw in our own parents, and we brought these patterns into our relationships. And so words like trauma and
Mhm.
abuse, I mean, those were words that to me they were once shrouded in like shame. Like you just don't say those words. But actually using those words and talking it out with a therapist, I mean, those offered like such like profound windows into like self-understanding and healing, right? And then also recognizing that in my wife as well, and she recognized it in me, and then we began to see each other as like innocent instead of just blaming each other for the problems, right? Then I took that approach and applied it to my parents, and like that really opened the door to learning things like forgiveness, right? And then forgiving not only them but also myself, right? Taking responsibility for the things that I've done or the things that I haven't done myself. Yeah. So I, you know, this is how I started to really investigate my own imbalances, right? Not just in my professional life, but also in my personal relationships. And you had mentioned that a lot of like high achieving folks often come from backgrounds of trauma, and that definitely like resonates 100% with my story.
Yeah.
So fast forward a little bit, I got into real estate investing, and one time I was at a real estate like mastermind group, and one of the exercises that we were doing was, we each had to go around the room and provide like a value add to the group. And I was toward the end of the line, and everyone before me, like they were giving tips on like productivity, or like you look at this app that I discovered, right? Or look at this new investment that I found. And it got to me, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what do I have to offer? Right. So I decided, hey, I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm just going to talk about my experience with the Gottman method and going through couples therapy, because I didn't know what else to say.
Yeah.
Right. And so I shared just for a few minutes, and then my answer got voted as like the best value add. I won a gift certificate.
Oh,
And I was just so floored when people came up to me afterwards in private, just thanking me for talking about that, right? For bringing that to their attention, because they all said, I thought I was alone. Like
mhm.
I thought I was the only one who, had a passionless marriage, or only one going through um marriage difficulties. They were just so thankful, and I was really floored by that.
Yeah.
But not long after, the head of the real estate investment group said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing coaching?" And it's like, huh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. But then a light bulb went off, and I realized, wow, I think my this is my purpose. It's to help guide like other high achieving individuals, like those investors and busy professionals in the mastermind group, like help them to succeed not only professionally, but to find true like lasting fulfillment in like multiple dimensions of their lives, like not just like a narrow definition of success. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I do nowadays. I I draw on all of my experiences. I draw on even my background in neurology. I draw on like the traditional Chinese medicine five elements, all these tools and all my own life experiences to help people on their journey to discover their own inner balance so that they can manifest the life that they want, right? To hopefully try find like true balance and fulfillment.
You speak my love language with words like manifest and But so I think, I mean, from what you're saying, from what I hear, if we just go back to that mastermind kind of thing,
Yeah.
everybody else is giving their, they're giving what they expect people to hear. Why am I so successful? Where
Yeah.
you were being authentic, like, this is who I am, right? And I
Yeah.
think that what the world is starving for is authenticity.
Yeah.
Because if you look on social media and you see people, they're always posting their perfect moments.
Mm.
They're not posting the times of, like you were saying, their struggles, or not, or if there are people who do talk about these things, but for the most part, especially the celebrities and things like that that we all look up
Mm.
to, it seems like they don't want to post about the true stuff that's going on. They just post about the things that make them look good, right? And we're all
Absolutely.
suffering in some sort of way. I think it gets less as you become who you are, then you don't
Mm.
suffer. But for the most part, I would say most people are suffering in some sort of way. And then the idea of the word trauma that you mentioned, and it's kind of like shameful, right?
Yeah.
And then people want to say, well, I didn't really have trauma in my life. And then you're like, but what is trauma really, right? It doesn't have to be that you had, an abusive parent, or that you were, sexually assaulted as a child, although these are traumatic things, but
Mm.
they can just be something that really shifted you, right?
Absolutely. I think you said it perfectly. And I completely agree there. It's hard to be authentic. And if I had to be honest, I mean, that's something that I continue to work on,
Hmm.
right? My parents were first generation immigrants from China, and they carried with them very traditional
Yeah.
values. So the concepts of like shame or saving face, these are very like deeply rooted in the culture, right? So I remember growing up, there was this expectation of, you know, don't don't show emotion, right? Don't show that you're upset. Like you just buckle down and you work hard.
Hmm.
Like that's how you cope,
Yeah.
right? Is to buckle down, work even harder. Do not bring shame to the family,
Mhm.
right? There are a lot of things that you just do not talk about, right? Like don't dishonor the family. Like these are very traditional values um that they brought over. And in many ways, they're even more traditional than what is seen in Asia or China nowadays,
Right.
right? They're sort of like stuck in time.
Yeah.
But so I realize that is something that I still work on. And so I remember how nervous I was that day at that mastermind group, just like sharing something to be vulnerable. But I did not expect um, the amount of people that would seek me out afterwards.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay. Like to what you're saying,
Because you're being
it's
real.
yeah. And that was so powerful. Like it still gives me chills to think back to that moment because I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a neurologist, when a child is told that they can't express their emotions, and that they have to keep things in, or they have to keep secrets, or they're just, in some way, shape, or form, basically denied their ability to be who they are and say what they want to say. Do you
Yeah.
have any knowledge on what that actually does to the brain itself?
Yeah, I mean from a neurological perspective, I think it is it's a profound effect, especially um when you're told to do that at an early age because your neurons are still forming, right?
Hmm.
And so in a way, the way I see it is that when you're discouraging a child from like fully expressing their emotions, you're almost like stunting the neuronal growth in that part of the brain. And unfortunately, there's going to be a day of reckoning. There's going to be like consequences down the road. There's going to be a time when it's problems are going to manifest from that part of the brain, like the emotional processing center. It's not like as fully developed. It's not as healthy as it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people like, so from you're saying your family very traditional Chinese, right? You don't
Yeah.
show your emotions, you don't shame the family. Shame's a big deal
Yes.
in the culture. All of the people who live previous to you,
Hmm.
they have this whole life too. How are they coping? Like, could you see they're coping in other ways too? I mean, I feel like I know that you can't show these emotions and you can't do this and you can't do that. So, there's the overachievement. But were there other coping mechanisms for your ancestry that you
Yeah,
know?
this is a yeah, I mean, this is a piece that it's still like it's still an ongoing discovery process, right? To put together the pieces, right?
Hmm.
So I'll bring up like one story that um it was like really affected me in a profound way, which was the death of my father in like when I was 24,
Hmm.
right? Um, so I'll give a little background about like the type of family I grew up in and like what was going on with him. So my father was very very rigid. Like I don't have any memories of him like, smiling or laughing at me. I mean, expectations were through the roof, especially when it came to academic achievements, right? And I'm the youngest of three boys, and both of my older brothers, I mean, they were fantastic in school, right? I mean, one of them I think was graduated top three of his class in Princeton. The other one went to Princeton. They got into all the Ivy League schools. They went to like a top-notch private high school, top of their class, right? And then here I am, the black sheep, right?
The runt.
Yes. Yes, bringing home, B's and B pluses. So just completely unacceptable. So, when I didn't perform up to the level that they expected, I mean, my parents just doubled down. Like they doubled down, like this is the formula. We've perfected the formula in the two before you. Like, why isn't this working? Well, clearly, like we're not trying hard enough. So we're gonna whatever it takes, we're gonna beat you, we're gonna lock you in the house. Like you're going to perform to these standards because we know this formula works.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so I still remember getting into um like even in high school, if I brought home a B on like a physics test, I mean, I got into fist fights with my dad. He'd pummel me, and this was in high school, and I remember um I sort of had a notion that this probably isn't normal even at that older age.
Right.
But it's something I never again, you just don't shame the family. You don't bring this up, right?
Mm.
You just kind of
It's a secret.
accept it. It's a
And
secret. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so he was very rigid, and he also carried this scarcity mindset, right? From I think from previous generations, he was always worried and paranoid about money, even if we were like solid like middle class family. Like he was always worried about something like a lawsuit taking it away or losing it somehow.
mm,
Um, and so it 2014 it came as like a real shock when he suddenly decided to take his own life.
mm,
Yeah. And a lot of emotions around that. I mean, like anger. There's some guilt too because I was still in medical training then, and he had what I now suspect was undiagnosed depression,
right.
right? Like, wow, God, why didn't I see that?
Mm,
Um, it's also regret for not ever having reconciled with him. Like I always craved to have some sort of like normal relationship
and approval, I
with.
would imagine.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was always after like their proof. I just wanted to be good enough, and I felt like I never I never got there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so after that happened, I mean, it was really interesting. So again, coming from this background where shame and saving face, these are such big concepts. I mean, um, to this day, you know, my mother asked that, we don't tell anyone, we don't talk about this. Like we don't like just tell people if they really press, tell them that he died from a heart attack.
Mm.
Right. Um,
So then you can't even process it, right? Because you have to hide that now.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, there's a short, there's this source of shame, right? It's even after his death, it's how do we project this image of everything is perfect, everything is fine. Yeah.
And is she still alive?
She still is alive, yeah.
How does she deal with you now being open about your life and your feelings and your emotions and showing that you are perfect, but you're not their idea of perfect.
I'll tell you the truth, we don't talk about
We still,
her late husband's death per se. I mean, I think
yeah.
to her, I mean, she still brings up every now and again. You haven't told anyone, right? You haven't told
Mm.
anyone, even though it's been yeah, it's been like 20 years.
Wow.
But she's still sort of clinging to that, and yeah, in many ways, it's tough to see. It's like so she's stuck, she's sort of stuck in time, and
Mm.
also still stuck on notions of what is success, right? So I know that she finds it like a real shame that like I'm not practicing clinical medicine anymore, right? It's you know, she has this very narrow definitions of success, and uh, you know, but but over time, I mean, I think um, I learned to let go. It took a lot of hard work, but I learned to let go of that like anger and hurt that I was holding on for many years.
Yeah.
Um, and I began to see my parents as innocent,
Mhm.
right? Like um, before, I mean, most of my memories were of like my hair being pulled, or I remember all these, so many of my textbooks, they got ripped up out of frustration, right? Because they couldn't understand why I wasn't performing well.
Mhm.
And then they would be followed by remorse. Like, you know, I remember my mom just like taping up the books again, right? And then they get ripped up again in the next episode where like frustration took over, and then it would get taped up again. And so you can imagine what all these books look like, right?
Mhm.
Um, for many years, like those were the memories that I had. Like I didn't want to think about my childhood. We talk about this idea how like negative emotions, those are much more powerful than the positive ones. Like some people say you need at least like five positive ones to at least just to cancel out like one negative one, right? So this negative sentiment override was my memory of my childhood. Like it was so hard to think of anything positive um, because that was what was in my head, right?
Mhm.
And so I carried like anger and hurt for a lot of years, and only through like um, working on processing these, like putting in the hard work, like learning personal development, that I was finally able to step back and say, okay, how do things look from their side? Like what's their angle? And I gradually realized, no, like my parents, that they're not the villains, right? They're innocent as well. It's just that they they were limited to like the mindsets and the tools that they had. Like they didn't have access to therapists and coaches and all the things that we have today, and they were trying their best, and they carried over their baggage, their traumas, their all the burdens of people that came before them. And then I thought, wow, okay, well, what kind of country did they come from? It was war torn. It was, the country had gone through decades and decades of war and unrest and colonialism. And so I was like, okay, it makes sense why they have this scarcity mindset, why they are the way that they are, right? And so it eventually led to this profound sense of empathy, right? And
And that's when you know you healed, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and even gratefulness.
Hmm.
Um, and going back to my dad's death, I mean, I suspect that what was going through his mind is that he was making like the ultimate sacrifice for the family.
Hmm.
I think to a level, I think to a degree he realized that his health, his physical health and mental health were failing, and he didn't want to be a burden on the family.
How sad.
He, yeah, because he planned his death meticulously,
Hmm.
and he left specific instructions that the debts were to be paid off, right? Instructions on like for my mom on how to access all the assets to take care of herself and us.
Hmm.
And so I think in his mind, I think he was, making the ultimate, yeah, the ultimate sacrifice. He didn't want to be a burden. Um, he
Yeah.
was a
How sad
protector, a provider. Yeah.
if you think about it from like somebody who's healed, how sad. You can't be
Yeah.
mad at somebody
Yeah.
when they think of themselves as somebody who could possibly be a burden to their family. Like, how can you be
Yes.
mad at that? That's just sad.
Yeah. It's sad. Yeah, and it's tragic. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this might be too personal, but if you could tell him something, what would you say if he was here? I'm sorry if it's too personal.
No, I think I tell him, I love you. I mean, I appreciate all the sacrifices that you made. I forgive you.
Mm.
I tell him that you were a pioneer. You came to the United States like not knowing anyone, like,
Mhm.
very little money in your pocket. You had to deal with assimilation. You had to deal with racism.
Mhm.
You had to deal with so much, and you suffered in silence. Um, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, Also, like you live on in me, and even though you're not around anymore, I'm gonna carry the torch. I'm gonna carry the torch of you and all those who came before you.
Mm.
And I will honor you by, you know, being the one who breaks that cycle of generational trauma.
Yeah.
That's how I'm gonna honor you, and that's how I'm gonna honor myself and all those who came before you, and then generations ahead.
And how does this impact your life as a father?
It gives me a real deep sense of why. It gives me this grander perspective and like a deep meaning. Like this is my purpose. Like
Mm.
I'm going to be the one who is a trailblazer in that regard. Like the wheel of suffering ends this generation,
Yeah.
you know? That's gonna be my legacy. I know in like the financial circles they talk about like legacy in terms of like tax planning and how much money to leave the next generation. But I think the richest form of legacy is something like this.
Yeah.
It's it's like the more intangible stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like the mindset and yeah, things that can't be measured by numbers.
It's honoring the people for who they are too, right?
Yeah.
Like our kids are just who they are. Like we can try to force academics down them and we can do all of these things to try to change them and mold them into what we feel like they should be. But
Yeah.
honoring them for who they are is really going to make them live a happy life, right? Not the money,
Yes.
not the accolades, not the
Correct.
diplomas and all the certificates and all of these different things.
Correct.
And all those people, it brings me back to that mastermind that you were at and
Mm.
back to the high achieving thing, right? So in my former life, I was a very high achiever and I was in all those mastermind classes and all of those different things and we talked about all of our successes and this and that. And I look back at it now and I think, well, we really didn't talk about anything of value.
Mm.
All we did was talk about how do you make more money, but nobody talked about how do you live a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
How do you honor your children and how do you honor your marriage and how do you honor your partnerships and how do you leave this world a better place? Because money doesn't leave the world a better place.
Correct.
Yeah.
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 So the overachievers, um, we talked about before we started recording was one thing that hit home with me because as I healed
Mm.
and I
Mm.
learned that my overachieving was a way for me to cope with not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, proving my worth, right?
Yes.
In your field, in your practice, what have you noticed about that realm of individual?
I completely agree with what you just said. Just from, I mean, from a personal level,
Yeah.
and also in a lot of people that I work with, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, oftentimes it's these are coping mechanisms that are carried on from childhood, right?
Mhm.
So whether it's someone that yeah, just came from economic scarcity and now they have this like unrelenting almost obsession to not only not repeat that, but they're gonna, they're gonna be so driven to make so much money,
Yeah.
right?
That could
Um,
never happen again.
yes,
Yes.
and I noticed that a lot of folks they know that this sphere of like personal development, they know that it exists,
Yeah.
right? In some form, but I think in their minds, they think, well, that can wait.
Yeah.
Once I have this huge bucket load of money,
Then I'll do
that's,
that.
yeah, and that's gonna make everything like easier and better. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's never fulfilled.
it's never fulfilled. Yeah.
Yeah, because the desire to have the bucket of money hasn't, the root cause, which we were talking about earlier, isn't fixed. So there's never going to be enough money because you haven't fixed the root cause of the desire to have that much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm sure you've seen this as well. It's like once you hit a benchmark, let's say like you're going for your first $1 million of net worth.
Yeah.
Well, once you get that, you get this, yeah, you get this euphoria, you get this high, but it's temporary, right?
Yes.
And then, well, what's the next benchmark?
Yep.
Let's go
It's
for
never
two,
enough. Yep.
two. Oh, this feels good, but it's temporary. Maybe it'll feel even better once I get to three and four and five.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And we're taught that. So think about these mastermind classes again, and we go back to that, but just in general, like just what we're taught. We're taught that next, what's next? What's
Yeah.
next? Not like, what have you achieved? How do you feel? Can you sit in this bliss for a bit and enjoy it? It's just like, okay, you've done that next.
Hmm.
You can never meet all the goals. It's always next, next, next. Something has to be bigger, bigger, bigger.
Yes. Yes. And so I mentioned earlier that on the side, one of the things I do for fun is running. Right? So
Mm.
I've lost count of how many marathons I've done. But I mentioned that in 2019, like that was sort of like the pinnacle of my my amateur running career. Right? I made it to the Boston Marathon. I broke the 3 hour barrier. I mean, things that I never thought were possible. and then, difficulties with our marriage came up, and then it really forced me to look at everything that I was doing. And I recognized that even in something that I was doing for quote unquote fun,
Mm-hmm.
I was approaching it with very much the same mindset
Mm-hmm.
that I was with things like academics or schooling. Right?
Right.
It became somehow, somewhere along the way, became like, okay, what are the metrics that I want to hit? What are the time goals? What are the paces that I need to hit? And so,
So the
oh,
fun goes away.
yeah. And it was very insidious. And it's like, wow, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, and yeah, but it was like just a revelation to realize, oh my gosh, I am using my old coping mechanisms,
Mm-hmm.
even in something
Mm-hmm.
for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this pursuit that I wanted to take up because I wanted to do something that I knew I was told I wasn't supposed to be good at. Like I was not supposed to be good at sports or anything like that. And so here I am, but with a chip on my shoulder, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna show people who say that I can't do this. I'm gonna prove them wrong, and I'm gonna prove all my doubters wrong.
Right.
And it's like it was this. I realized there was this like dark energy, this almost this anger inside that was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna show them.
Yep.
Okay? I'm gonna crush these goals. I'm gonna reach the next one, the next one, the next one, and then you realize each time you hit them, the euphoria, it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What have you found that's more lasting?
is follow your heart, like do things out of joy, right?
Mm.
Nowadays, like when I do sports or physical activities, I'm much more drawn to it for like the camaraderie, the social aspect,
Mm.
right? Um, Purposely doing things where, like, yeah, I'm purposely doing things where I'm not good at, right? Just embracing that beginner's mindset, right? Um, like in Taoism, they call this like the uncarved block, like
Mm-hmm.
just nothing's been imprinted and just approach it with like a baby's mind,
Yeah.
right? Um and approach things with a lightness, right? And like just a love of it, right? And just yeah, it feels a lot lighter. It feels so much more freeing, right? There's no you're supposed to do this, right? There's no like sense of obligation or duty, like or this is what's expected of you. Yeah.
And there's also not that. So you were talking about like somebody told you you weren't supposed to be able to do sports, like how they knew that is beyond me, right? But we
Yeah.
do, we like imprint these things in our children, like you're not athletic, you're
Yeah.
not smart, you're not blah, 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 blah. And
Right.
so you carry that with you.
Hmm.
And so for your entire life, you think like, I'm not good at sports.
Yeah.
And then you want to prove them wrong, right? So then
Yeah.
there's that whole different thing. But
Yeah.
it's like these imprints that we carry with us. So I always tell people, what are your imprints? Like what is it that you think about yourself that somebody told you that you've
Yeah.
never actually even encountered, right? Just somebody told it to you, and then you've decided that it's true.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in my mind at that time, I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna break free
Yeah.
of your expectations of me,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna prove you wrong.
Yeah.
And later I realized, oh, ironically,
In
by focusing on that, I'm actually still like mentally
this cycle.
enslaved. Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, this is nuts.
And I see that with children. You have children, I have children, and I live in California, and they're so competitive with the sports. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And like these kids can't have fun
Yeah.
because there's just so much of the parent wanting to live through the child.
Mm.
And in my opinion, that's my diagnosis of it. But
Uh,
they don't let them enjoy the sport for what it is. They have to achieve, they have to be like these Olympians, you know?
yeah. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest burdens like us parents can place on kids, which is like um our aspirations and dreams that we haven't achieved, and
Right.
if we pass it on to the kids, that's actually, I think, like a tremendous burden
Yeah.
on them.
And that
Yeah.
seems like some of your story, right? Because your parents gave up so much to
Hmm.
come here, start over.
Yeah.
And so for them, I would imagine in their minds, they were just trying to set you up for a success, set you up for a
Yes.
life that would be comfortable so you didn't have to struggle like they did.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when you can't see that till you take away the blame and the hate and the upset.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you can see that, it's like, oh, they're just people too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this veil has been lifted off, like off over your eyes.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, but for so long, like that was clouding my vision and just affected the way that I engage in any pursuit. Right?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I gotta say it's hard work, but it's like absolutely worth it, and it's like incredibly freeing. It's like a load is lifted off your back,
Yeah. And
right?
don't you agree that it's never done? The work is never done.
It's never done, yeah. And
I always tell people if you're going to get started, it's way better over here, but it's still not done.
yeah.
Talk to me
um,
about Chinese traditional medicine and why you got into, or traditional Chinese medicine, why you got into that.
so I got into it. I mean, partly to learn more about like the rich heritage and history that like my forefathers came from, right?
Hmm.
I wanted to see for myself, like, is there anything more than just what I was seeing, which is like the rigidity, like the filial piety, the like honoring the ancestors. I wanted to see for myself.
Hmm.
And so in medical school, I had a chance to do an elective in Shanghai, China, and I got to see traditional Chinese medicine used alongside of Western medicine. I thought, wow, this is so interesting, right? So they're giving like, stroke patients, for example, like neurology patients, medicines that we would give here in the in North America, but also prescribing them herbs. It's like wow, like this is this is so cool. No one blinks an eye. It's just seamlessly integrated there. And that's what I thought of when like I became disillusioned with the healthcare system when I was practicing on the East Coast. Yeah, and then I did formal training and education in that. And one of my favorite frameworks is the traditional Chinese medicine five elements,
Hmm.
and I found it just so it's relatively simple, but it's so profound in its wisdom, and I love that it's actually initially based on observations of nature, right? So what are the qualities of wood, right? So for example, wood, it's about like cultivating growth and resiliency, right? Water, like, Bruce Lee has that famous saying, like, be water, my friend, right?
Yeah.
Um, I love that it just takes lessons from nature, like the elements around us, and I love that over the centuries, like they perfected this system based on observations of the human body and also nature, and it's just a really cool way um, to see us as really part of something greater. Right?
Yeah.
There's like a beautiful logic to it, and I found that it's something that like your understanding can continue to evolve over time, and you realize just how rich it is and how applicable it is in so many realms of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you think that we spend so much of our time just trying to separate ourselves from nature? Think about like how we live, right? We completely separate ourselves from nature. We enclose ourselves in these houses that have air
Yeah,
conditioning and heating, and we sit in offices that are like, you're not grounded in any way, shape, or form. You're not touching nature. You're not touching the earth. We think of
yeah.
ourselves, I think, oftentimes even superior to nature, not understand.
Yes, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, not understanding that we're all nature. Like, in fact, the more connected you are with your natural habitat and
Mm.
nature, the more connected you are with yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to what you're saying, there's almost this sense of nature is something to be tamed.
Hmm.
Like we can control it. Like
Hmm.
um, you know, we as humans, we're at the top of the food chain,
Right.
right? Um, like nature is something to master, to
Mm.
conquer.
Yep.
Yeah, there's sort of that mindset.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is just a random side
Mm,
note. It was interesting at my son's school, he's 10. They
mm,
built an outside classroom this last over the summer,
mm.
which is really cool because like now they have a space where the kids can go sit outside in the garden and the teachers can rotate and teach in the
Yeah.
garden instead of in these boring classrooms that, create ADHD and all of these other things, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
So, they can touch the earth, their feet can touch the earth as they're, sitting there, and they can smell the flowers and all of these different
Uh,
things that we don't even recognize that our body takes in
mm,
when we're in nature, right? And what our
mm.
body lacks when we're not in nature. So
Absolutely, yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
use this to help people?
So I love the five elements because it's only five, right? So it's relatively easy to remember. So we can run through them real quick. So the five elements are wood, f fire, earth, metal, and water. And so if we just think about them each, so wood we talked about is about like cultivating growth and resilience, right? Much like plants and trees in nature. In fact, oftentimes the most beautiful plants and the tallest trees are the ones who are the most resilient, right? The ones who are able to endure like the tough conditions, right?
Mm,
You have fire, which is about igniting your passion and activating your self-expression. And the cool thing about fire is that it there's no limit to how much it can spread, right? So
mm,
if you think about what that means for something like joy and self-expression, when we're authentic and true to ourselves, that energy can spread like without limit. And think
mm,
about how powerful that is.
mhm,
You have the element earth, which is to me, it's about like nourishing yourself in order to be able to uplift and empower others. Um, I think for this element, I think it's really important to remember you have to nourish yourself first to be
mm,
able to nourish others effectively. So that includes things like personal development, um, recognizing your own self-worth, um, accepting yourself for all of your imperfections. Like
mhm,
these are I think the tenets that we need to embrace before we can be at our best to help others.
mhm.
Otherwise, if we see this with some people, like they give, but they burn out because they've never taken the time to nourish themselves.
Yep. And that's including sleep, right?
Yes,
Yes, because
very much so.
and you're a sleep specialist, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you understand. I think that there's a big lack of sleep and people don't understand that that's very, very important.
absolutely. Yeah, and there's this culture of like, hey, I'll get through my day with coffee, right?
Oh,
Rather than listening to the signs and cues that your body is telling you, right?
I'm tired.
Instead
Yeah,
of instead of asking, gosh, why am I always tired at 3 p.m.?
right,
Right?
right.
It's okay.
Have
We're,
more
we're
caffeine. Yeah,
have more caffeine, right? I'll just
yeah,
have like the double espresso from Starbucks, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so continuing with the last two elements, then you have metal, which which I I say it's about seeking clarity and letting go of the unnecessary, right? And that includes practicing forgiveness, right? So practicing the things that we hold on that no longer serve us, or these include limiting beliefs or these stories that we tell ourselves that we think are are not able to be changed, right? Stories with meanings that aren't able to evolve, right? So metal represents like refinement, purification, and sort of cleansing yourself of the things that no longer work for you.
Mm.
And then finally we have water, which is about embracing the uncertainty of life, right? Trusting your intuition, flowing with change. Right? I think a lot of people are very certainty and stability driven, and that that really inhibits personal growth and like growth in so many areas, right? Whereas life is just inherently um,
Unstable.
unstable, yeah. And so if we just
Yeah.
accept that fact and just go with the flow, then
Yeah. You can't
it's
control it.
yeah, it just it'll actually nurture us,
Mhm.
yeah.
Have you read Shannon Lee's Be Water, My Friend by her dad's memoirs?
Not yet, not
Okay.
yet. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm gonna add that to my list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how do you take all of these things that you described to us, all of these different elements,
yeah.
and how do you bring them into your practice to help people?
So first, I'll go over these, and I think it's important to do some sort of assessment to figure out like which elements within you are stagnant, which ones could be activated more.
Mm,
The cool thing about these elements that all of us we're born with like either one or two that are just naturally strong,
mhm.
and this is what the folks discovered thousands of years ago is that we all have one, maybe two elements that are just there are natural strengths, right? But these natural strengths are also the uh, cause of like a most likely cause of potential problems, so
Right.
potential health problems, right? So for example, people who are dominant in wood, statistically speaking, they're more prone to certain ailments that are related to muscles and tendons, and more likely to have like liver issues or headaches, migraines.
Mm,
Um, People who are like metal dominant, they're more likely to have like respiratory issues or certain digestive issues, right?
mm,
People with people who are really strong at the water element, along with their natural strengths, medically and physically, they're more likely to have issues like kidney stones or prostate problems or problems with their genital urinary system.
mm.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that that over the millennia they noticed that yeah, people inherently have an element that is like that is strong, but is also the most likely potential source of problems when it goes out of balance. Okay. So this is where the holistic aspect comes in because I'll sort of ask questions to figure out like okay, like which elements are you, and then
Right.
that'll include some like health questions as well, because your body will oftentimes give you a lot of signs of like what element you're strong at, but also like, what elements or elements might be out of balance.
Yeah, because your body can't lie, but you can think certain things about yourself, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
yes,
especially
and
overachievers, there's nothing wrong with them.
correct.
So we were talking about overachievers and how so this
Yeah.
is the fun thing for me about this because I
Mm,
think that when you are a practitioner, a holistic practitioner in general, instead of looking at the just the symptoms,
yeah.
right? You look at the whole person.
Hmm.
Yeah. So tell us about how, like, again, how your practice in looking at these things helps people.
Yeah, so if we go back to the five elements, the really fun thing about the five elements is that there's a relationship between all of them, right? So for example, the order in which I mentioned the elements here, like wood, fire, earth, metal, water. So after water, you go back to wood. So think of this as like a continuous cycle, right? So each element helps to support or generate the one after it, right? So for example, uh, the water element will naturally support wood, wood will naturally support fire, and so on. So when we see that somebody, let's say, who has a good, like inherently like a very has a very strong, let's say wood characteristic, you can one way to go about achieving balance is yes, you focus on the wood element, things that you can do to help that, right? Um, to leverage those strengths. That's certainly one way you could do it. That's the most direct way.
Mhm.
But it's oftentimes like a equally, if not more effective way is to look at your other elements, the things that we're naturally we're naturally like lacking, right? Or we might need to spend some more time to activate, right? So for someone, for example, who is wood dominant, you might look at your water element, right? Because water feeds wood. And so if you think about like the concepts that I mentioned earlier about water, like trusting your intuition, embracing uncertainty, like flowing with change,
Right.
we can see how that actually, if we embrace those concepts, that will make it easier to be even better at the wood aspects, such as cultivating growth and resiliency, right? If we're able to use our intuition, like follow our inner wisdom, embrace uncertainty, that will help us cultivate growth and resiliency, right? If we continue on that, this is what I call the generation cycle. It's like wood then leads into fire. So if you're able to cultivate growth and resiliency, this will make it much easier to find your passion, to find your joy, to find ways to express yourself, right? Um, if you're able to do that, then going next along the generation cycle, then you have Earth, right? If we're able to harness our inner joy, if we're able to fully express ourselves, our authentic selves, well, that is very much related to nourishing yourself, accepting yourself, right? This makes it easier to then help others and to nourish others.
Mhm.
So on and on. So we start to see this relationship between the elements, and it's really interesting, right? So we talked about like the generation cycle here, where each element feeds one another. Right?
Mhm.
There's another type of relationship between the elements, and that's traditionally known as like the controlling cycle. But some people might hear that and think, well, th does that mean that like one element suppresses the other? The answer is is no. It's more that if we focus on this element, it'll actually help the target element express itself in a much more balanced way.
Mhm.
Mm. So we'll take an example of the wood element. So the element that controls wood is metal. So if you think about it, like there's a person with axe chopping down wood, or you're
Right.
using like a pair of like metal clippers to trim trim branches, right? So someone who is, let's say, like really strong in the wood element, but hasn't really worked much on the metal element. This type of person might be someone who is just full of ideas, right? They have 10 different ideas for a new project, or they want to start up like five different companies at the same time, really passionate. But then when it comes down to it, uh-oh, like where do I start? And they have trouble following through, right? Because they're just so creative, and they're just so expansive. So in that instance, embracing qualities of the metal element which is about like clarity, organization, discipline. That's what you need to be able to express the wood in its most balanced and effective way.
So I'm
Yeah,
going to
so
play
that,
devil's advocate to that, okay?
yeah, yeah,
Because I'm one of those people who has all kinds of lovely ideas, and then
I
I
can
need
tell.
people to organize me because
Yeah,
I don't organize me.
yeah.
As soon
You're
as
like
you,
me. Yeah,
yeah, as soon as you say like discipline and I'm like, oh no,
yeah.
I instantly resist. So how would you work
Yes,
with somebody like me?
I'm the exact same way. And when I first learned this in Chinese medicine, I was like, yeah, go team wood. Like, yeah, like
Yep.
wood all the way. And I I realized that the people in life that I can't stand the most are the ones who are really rigid,
Yes.
right? Black and white thinking, right? Like the librarian who doesn't care if your mother was sick, your book was late for one day, like you're
Right.
you're paying that 3 cents. Like the rules are the rules are the rules,
Yep.
right? And so for the longest time, I was like, I'm glad I'm not metal. Like these are the people I can't stand. Um, but then I gradually like uh came to the realization, okay, well, each element has like healthy ways to express themselves, right? So metal, if expressed unhealthily, it's being overly rigid, being overly disciplined, right? Like I had such an aversion to that
Hmm.
because of my childhood,
Right.
right? So for the longest time, I just despised anything that was linked to metal. But then I realized, okay, these are unhealthy expressions of metal. And so
Yes.
if the metal element is too strong, again, then that will completely cut down. Like it'll just overact on wood.
Yeah.
So we don't want that. We want a healthy expression of each element. That's what we should be going for, right? And so healthy expression of metal is that yes, you do need some discipline. You do need some. It's good to have clarity. It's good to have clarity to whittle down like those just 5 different projects you want to start at the same time. To okay, which one should we start with first?
Yeah.
Let's start with that. And what are the steps to actually um, you know achieve this progress that we're after.
Can we hire that out?
Yeah.
Does that balance us if we hire that out?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean this is like I mean you bring up another good point is that oftentimes like we all have natural strengths, right? We all have natural weaknesses. And I think this is where like if we're in a relationship with a partner, like what are their strengths?
Yeah. Balance each
Right.
other out.
You can really balance each other out. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, people know about like yin yang, but this is like a different form of like the balance equation, except you have 5 elements. So
Hmm.
sometimes we can ask ourselves like, who are the type of people that I work well with? Like, who are the people that I'm attracted to?
Hmm.
Is there that natural like sort of polarity and balance between the elements?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you can't have a bunch of wood people together and you can't have because you have to,
Yes.
and this is how you set up successful business too, is
Yes. Yes.
having various people with different types of strengths and weaknesses,
Correct. Yeah.
to offset each other. Because like you said, there are some things that are just simply natural. So
Yeah.
you don't want to fight against nature. You want to
Right. Right.
embrace it and then balance it, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you bring up the usefulness of this model in when we were talking about like teams in business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very applicable, and I find that uh, when folks learn about like these different elements, then
Hmm.
it almost builds an appreciation for people's differences,
Yes.
right? So instead of like I wish this person was like me, right?
Right.
Like because I'm obviously perfect.
Right. Right.
It's okay. This person is it's a different element. But then if you know the framework, you realize, okay, there, yeah, there's
There's a compliment.
these are. yeah, these are the strengths of this person
Hmm.
instead of why isn't everyone like me? Like why can't everyone be as awesome and as amazing as I am?
My husband and I had this conversation yesterday because we were talking to a friend, and in our household, I cook, he cleans.
Hmm.
I wash the clothes, he folds them because I don't want to fold them and I don't want to clean the dishes,
Yeah,
but he doesn't mind doing that. So I'm like, we have balance.
I
And
love
he
that.
was looking at me like, and he like he's not getting the balance part. I'm like, no, there's balance.
I love that.
You don't like to cook. I like to cook. There's balance. But really it is everything in life is balance, right? And so,
Yeah,
being playful, but in
yeah,
general, that's how you achieve a happy life.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And so you have on your website, people can go and take this quiz to find out what their elements are, where they're strong, where they're off balance, maybe. Yeah, can you tell us about that?
yeah, so if folks go to my website, it's drpowu.com, so drpowu.com. On there, there's a quiz. It takes about I'd say 10, 15 minutes to complete, and you can answer a series of questions, and it's a fun experience. You can see at the end what your results are and where you like which element or elements you naturally gravitate towards. So it's good for folks who are into these types of personality type quizzes and just want to learn a little bit more about themselves.
Yeah, I think it's good for folks who aren't too, because that's the
Mm,
more eye-opening, right? I feel like when
yeah,
you're in this, you kind of already get an idea of who you are. It's those people that aren't even open to it. If they could just
yeah,
try it, maybe they might be surprised.
yeah. You bring up a great point. Oftentimes, it's like planting a seed, right?
Hmm.
Planting a seed of, oh, maybe there's some things that I haven't thought about, right?
Right.
And sort of like going back to our original discussion about trauma in high achievers. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes like folks might wonder, well, a lot of people go through trauma and adversity, but obviously not everyone becomes a high achiever. Not everyone, ends up harnessing those obstacles and making them opportunities,
Right.
right? So what's the difference? What sets like one group apart from the next? And I think sometimes it's these little seeds that are planted along the way, right? Whether it's like listening to a podcast like yours or like reading a book or talking to a friend who just planted this idea in your head, or it's these little things that hopefully folks will one day think back like, oh, I came across this concept once.
Yep.
Yeah, and then that seed will hopefully blossom into into its own journey.
Yeah. And if you feel connected, if you try enough things, there will be something you feel connected to.
Right.
Right? So being open to just trying. You
Yeah.
don't have to go with it full force, but just try.
Yeah, exactly. What's the worst thing that happens, right?
Maybe
It's
15 minutes of your life, right? If they take the
exactly.
quiz, right? And I'm sure they
Exactly.
all spend social media time more than 15 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Good, very good. Well, I'm going to put all of your contact information in so that people can, in the comments, so that people can reach out to you and, take your quiz, and then maybe see if there is an opportunity for additional help. But if nothing else, I'm sure that you've planted plenty of seeds today. So we appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Barbie. It was really fun, and I feel like we could keep talking for hours.
I know we could if people be like, get off.